Whenever you think back even to that transition between coming from a rural environment where you were working, and were all your friends working on their farms as well? Like there's that culture. What was it that, as a teenager, you thought, well, I'd love to go and do a certain degree and maybe have that sort of career?
Well, this may sound a bit peculiar, Richard, but when I reflect on the pathway that I've taken through life, and I contrast that now to what I see and try to afford to other people, in a sense, they're quite far apart. So when I reflect on my pathway, the priority impressed upon me at school was to get the transfer, to get into a grammar school, to get your GCSEs, to get your A-levels, to go to university. Yeah, get your degree and in essence, it was quite a linear path. And I don't recall having a lot of influence over that path. Mm. And I contrast that to the pathways that I'm encouraging people to think about nowadays and the options that are there. And really they are indeed worlds apart. So that's how I reflect now. Whether that's how it was, I think that's how I reflect on it now. Yeah. So, the concept of taking a year out, or the concept of reflecting on, is this the right thing for me? I don't recall moments like that in my career, certainly not on the educational side. Mm. It was a matter of understanding what was required to get to the next stage. Yeah. And the degree was the holy grail. The degree got you to a place of where you were deemed employable. Mm. And then, the interview was where your personality needed to come across. And I contrast that with what we're trying to do now, whereby I think there is much more time for reflection. There is much more alternative routes that one can take. And I think that's brilliant. Yeah. I absolutely think that's brilliant. And I just wish that more of that had been available when I was coming through, because there were moments, certainly in my educational journey, like I went to university for 4 years, 3 years of study, 1 year out. The time that I enjoyed best was my time in the workplace. Mm-hmm. I didn't particularly enjoy university. I came from quite a different environment into the city, so there was a whole conflation of issues going on there. Now, I stuck with it, as I sort of tended to do throughout my life and my career, to get what I needed out of it. But I don't necessarily reflect on it as being, a tremendously uplifting and positive experience for me. I was there for a purpose, and I got. Now, that contrasts obviously with how a lot of other people would view that type of experience, but that's how it was for me. Yeah. If I had my time again and I was starting out now, I definitely would be taking a different path. I'm not necessarily saying I would end at a different destination, but I definitely would take a different path, because the idea of apprenticeships in particular is something that appeals to me hugely. Mm-hmm. And the idea of getting people from alternative backgrounds into high profile, highly rewarding jobs is something which I think is, to me, it didn't seem as available when I was coming through as it is now. Yeah, yeah.
So who were the role models for you then? Because you at home, you have your mum as a teacher, your dad was working the farm, and were there role models for you, or did you just happen to get kind of sucked through that system, so to speak?
I think it's probably more of the latter, Richard, to be honest. As I said earlier, I think that sort of path was, so being the youngest, like it was a path that was well trodden in the family.
Okay, yeah.
So, and I was just the next one. In essence, I was just the next one. So the oldest in our house is my sister. We just have one girl, and then there's the 7 boys, of which I'm the 7th son. But my sister's a GP. So like she got the ball rolling in our house, whereby she went on what was a 7 or 8 year journey to become, a professional in the occupation that she chose. So that was almost an extreme version of the pathway that the rest of us were there. And we have a couple of bankers, we have a couple of accountants, we've a different variety in the house. But there nearly was the next one up type scenario where the priority was to get a good level of qualification, get a good level of education, and then you get your job thereafter. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think it's a bit more, there's more variety, it's a wee bit more complex now, but complexity in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing if it affords you opportunity. Yeah, yeah. So I'm not saying, Richard, that there weren't role models, and I can think of people, in the community, and I can think of some of my teachers, for example, who were good role models. But again, and maybe it's just how society has moved on for us. I don't recall conversations around role models.
Yeah.
I just recall conversations around, right, where are you at? Where do you need to go and how are you going to get there? You know, a sort of typical strategy type conversation. So that's how it was in our house, Richard.
No, and similar in our house as well. I did maths and applied for civil engineering. Didn't know any civil engineers. My dad asked me, "Do you know what a civil engineer does?" I was like, "No," but it looks you need to do maths to do it. So you know, it's these strange sliding doors moments, so to speak.
Sure,
you know that you're on. You mentioned about these alternative pathways, and you've been spearheading a lot of these professional and business services employment academies. So if you're pitching it to an employer, what is different about an employment academy? Why would they use that?
So I think the first thing to say about what we do in the world of employment academies is that what the provision we provide is non-statutory in nature, and we're privileged in that regard insofar as anything
break that down
we
for
do.
us. What is non-statutory?
So what that means in my world is that anything we do, we're in a position where we can observe the provision which others are providing, be that in the public or private sector, from the public or private sector.
Colleges,
FE colleges and training providers. Right. So we're observing what, and then I guess where we think we fit within that puzzle is that there are people for whom that doesn't work, for whom the existing provision doesn't work. And that's not necessarily by design, it's just how the outworkings of that system. So ultimately we're a council, so therefore we're accountable to our ratepayers. So what we're trying to offer the residents of Belfast is an opportunity for those who want to obtain employment, but we're trying to afford the opportunity to those who maybe don't necessarily have the qualifications or indeed the work experience that typically is required by these higher end employers within the likes of the technology industry or the professional services industry. So my day job involves really asking employers and talking to employers to really critically assess whether the criteria and the specifications which they're setting out, how well they match the job roles that those individuals undertake. So do entry-level role positions, for example, require a degree? And do they require, or do they require more practical skills? So what we're trying to do through our academy process, which in essence is a boot camp type style intervention, is we're trying to offer people in Belfast, people whom we spot potential in, people who can demonstrate to us that they have potential and aptitude to work within these quite demanding industries. And our commitment to them is that we will take them from where they're at the moment to a position of having secured a job interview with a recruiting employer for those individuals.
Okay.
So on the supply, that's the offer. The offer is, if you can demonstrate to us that you have a bit of something about you, that we can then work on with you, then what we also need to do is have a set of employers in lockstep with us, people who have reflected on their specifications, people who have reflected on the extent to which those qualifications and experience are necessary, and we bring one to the other. And we ask those employers to consider these applicants for those roles. And the quid pro quo in this is that we invest in the individuals, and the employer ultimately then has a choice to make at the end of that as to whether they think those individuals can fit within their business.